Hello, everybody. Bonsoir à tout le monde. Non.
We hear you.
Bon. Merci. Bonjour, bonjour à tout le monde. Merci d'être avec nous ce soir pour cette Assemblée générale annuelle. Thank you all for being with us for this annual general meeting. We're a few minutes late, but I think we've got a fair number of people, and that's great too. Although I can't see everybody, it's great that so many of you have joined. I'm Catherine Lane, je suis le président du conseil d'administration de la Maison de soins palliatifs d'Ottawa. I'm Catherine Lane, the chair of the board of Hospice Care Ottawa. Welcome again to this virtual annual general meeting. I want to open by land acknowledgement. Je reconnais qu'Ottawa soit aménagé sur un territoire non cédé, la nation Algonquin and Anishinaabe. We respect and value the knowledge and cultures of Indigenous peoples and strive to incorporate these into our work at Hospice Care Ottawa. It certainly is unfortunate that we could not be meeting in person, but given the circumstances, we felt that it really was a more prudent decision to once again have this meeting virtual. On espère que l'an prochain, on espère. I want to thank all the members of Hospice Care Ottawa for your continuing support in this difficult time. And on your behalf, I would like to extend our thanks to the volunteers, our partners, and our donors, including, of course, the Maycourt Club of Ottawa, our sustaining benefactor. And a very large thank you to our staff. It's due to all of you that Hospice Care Ottawa could continue offering hospice palliative care to residents of Ottawa during this past year, which has had its ups and downs, certainly perhaps a little better than last year, but still some difficult times. Nous vous sommes très reconnaissantes pour votre contribution dans notre accomplissement général. Merci encore à tout le monde. I will act as chair of the meeting, and Johanna Sahas Martin, a director and the secretary of Hospice Care Ottawa, will act as secretary. I appoint Rhiannon Dufay, project coordinator at Hospice Care Ottawa, to act as scrutineer of the meeting. And I'd also like to note that we have also behind the scenes, Melissa Morningstar, who's helping run the tech, and Bonnie Harnden, who you'll see on your screen, and who is our wonderful board and AGM minute taker. Thank you to all of you. Rhiannon, can you let me know how many members of Hospice Care Ottawa are participating via proxy or by computer?
We have 37 members attending by computer this evening and 1 voting member by proxy.
Oh, nice. Okay. And I see that we do have a quorum of members participating, and according to our bylaws, we do have enough for a quorum, enough directors for a quorum. So I declare the meeting regularly constituted for the transaction of business. Well, the meeting will be conducted in English. Si vous avez des questions, vous pouvez les poser également en français. You may also ask questions in French or English. So Rhiannon, can you explain how the voting will be conducted at the meeting?
Yes. So depending on the device that you're on, the poll may automatically display on your screen or it may not. If we tell you that the voting has started and you don't see it appear on your screen right away, we just ask that you click on the 3-dot more icon on your screen. And again, depending on your device, I can't say exactly where that will be, but as soon as you find the 3 dots that say more, you will see the poll immediately available. We will keep the first one open for at least a minute, and assuming everyone is able to vote, then going forward, we'll keep them open for 30 seconds. Also, just a little bit of housekeeping. We ask that everyone keep their camera turned off unless you're the speaker tonight, just to ensure the best call quality for anyone. And if you're set to speak or present, please turn your camera on so that participants can see that you are speaking. And of course, I've broken my own rule and got on my camera. My apologies. And we kindly ask that you submit any questions through the chat this evening. We'll have plenty of opportunity to be monitoring the chat and ask for input throughout the evening. And finally, in terms of the voting, if you are a paid member and or board member, please submit a vote in the poll. If you are not a paid member or board member, we ask that you do not vote, as we're unable to count that in the tally. That's it for me.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Rhiannon. I'm going to actually keep my video and speaker on because I'm doing most of the talking, and I'll invariably forget to put either on when I'm talking.
That is fair.
Okay, thanks. So there are a number of motions. We have actually a quite packed agenda, a number of motions before members at this meeting. You've all received notice of these motions in the material that was sent to you in August, and we will proceed as per the agenda that was sent to you. We have two preliminary motions, agenda and previous minutes. And proceeding to the first motion, I'll use the chair's prerogative and like to add an additional item of other business at the end of the agenda. We forgot it last year too, so we'll have to make sure that next year it actually gets onto the agenda. So I would like to, so the motion would read, resolved to adopt as amended the agenda for the September 28th, 2022 meeting that was circulated to all members of the corporation. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Catherine, I would like to move the motion. It's Benoit Hubert.
Thank you, Benoit. A seconder?
And I'll second it, Joanna.
Thank you. Any discussion?
None in the chat.
Okay, thanks, Rhiannon. I invite you then to refer to your screen and exercise your vote on the motion using the polling function. Oh, look at that. Oh, isn't that cool? Rhiannon, are you keeping time or do you want me to?
I am. There's
Okay.
a tally running on my screen.
Okay, super, thanks.
30 seconds remaining, and in fact, we have received all votes, so I'm going to end the poll.
So could you tell me the results?
Yes, I'm just going to download them.
Oh, okay, sorry.
We actually are up to 39 members in attendance now, and we have 39 votes for and a single vote for received by proxy and no votes against.
Super. So I declare the motion carried and the amended agenda for tonight's meeting is approved. Thank you all. That went smoothly. Thank you. The second preliminary motion is as follows. Resolved to approve the minutes of the annual general meeting of the members of the corporation held on September 20th, 2021, that are posted on Hospice Care Ottawa's website. Could I have a mover, please?
Barb McNally, I so move.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Bruno Carchidi will move it, Catherine.
Thanks, Bruno. Any discussion? Use the chat function and Rhiannon is monitoring that.
Nothing in the chat. I will launch the poll.
Okay.
10 seconds remaining. Thirty-nine votes received for, 1 proxy for, 0 against.
Thank you. I declare the motion carried and the minutes of the last AGM are approved. Maintenant, je veux demander à Benoît, notre vice-présidente, à conduire la cérémonie de l'allumage des bougies. I'd like to ask Benoît, our vice chair, to conduct the candle lighting ceremony, please.
Merci beaucoup, Catherine. Bonsoir. Good evening, everyone. The first candle, donc la première chandelle, nous allumons pour se souvenir de celles et de ceux qui ont pris au courant de la dernière année leur dernier souffle entre nos mains. The first candle is to remember those who have died under our care. La seconde chandelle est pour les familles, les aidants et les aidantes de ceux qui sont décédés. The second candle is for the families and caregivers of those who have died under our care. Et la troisième chandelle pour celles et ceux qui orientent le travail et l'avenir de la maison de soins palliatifs, comme vous, nos membres qui participez ce soir à notre assemblée annuelle. The third candle for us who guide our work at hospice and a number of you as members of Hospice Care Ottawa. Thank you. Merci.
Merci, Benoît. Thank you, Benoît. Always very moving. So the next item is the presentation of the auditor's report and the audited financial statements of Hospice Care Ottawa for the year ended March 31st, 2022. This was to have been presented by our treasurer, Stephanie Alea. Stephanie is unfortunately unable to be with us tonight. So I will do a brief overview of the statements and attempt to answer any questions. So the statements were on the website of HCO's website. So I hope you've had an opportunity to look at them. These statements were passed by the board for presentation and recommended for presentation at our annual general meeting. A few things to note. One, that there is a qualified opinion, which is not unusual for nonprofit organizations such as ourselves, which routinely collect donations. So that is not something unusual, in that those cash donations sometimes come in and they can't always be verified by audit. Second, that we have a very strong balance sheet, as we did last year. So we are tracking very well. We have some $3 million in our account, and that will carry us forward for a while. But I will say, and I will say it now and again at the end, this is not sustainable. In terms of the revenues from last year, you'll see that basically our donations are up, which is wonderful. We have unimaginable and fabulous support from your members, from many donors, and from the community, and from our special events. We send huge thanks. You'll notice that there is a decline in other. So there is a fair decline from last year in the revenues, and that's basically due to the cessation of the special COVID-related not donations, but revenues that we received by way of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, which we did not. We only received a little bit this year. I would remind everybody that although we do have a a strong balance sheet, that we do have a mortgage on Ruddy Shankman of $2.3 million. It's at a very good rate of 3.9%. And we are chipping away at that mortgage on a yearly basis. Again, I would remark in closing that this is funding model, the current funding model for hospices, for our hospice and for hospices across Ontario is not sustainable. So we will continue to do our advocacy work, which we have been doing throughout the year with the provincial government and the federal government as appropriate, but certainly with the provincial government in order to raise the amount of funding that is given to hospices by the province from some 60% of clinical costs to 80% of clinical costs. And we are hoping that that would be successful. To date, it hasn't been, but we're still hopeful. We're also very hopeful, and this is not in the financial statements, we are also very hopeful that we will be able to open beds in the East, particularly oriented toward Francophones. And again, that is dependent on provincial funding. So I'd open if there are any questions or comments. I see there are some in the chat room. I'm nervous about doing the chat because I can never know.
I can read the chat to you, Catherine. The question is from Terry Murray, and they're asking what is not sustainable and why. Oh, sorry, funding model is not sustainable. What can members do regarding increasing provincial funding?
Well, you can lobby your provincial MPPs to increase hospice care funding to, as I say, 80% of clinical costs. That would certainly enable us, to open beds in the East, and also to have less of a burden on the fundraising. We now have to raise $2.2 million every year just to keep our two doors open. So that would be very useful. If you have contacts in the Ministry of Finance or in Health, please let us know, and we will certainly. Thank you, Lisa. It's 100%. I keep messing that up. It's 100% of clinical funding instead of, which will still mean we have to fundraise, but it won't be as onerous. So 100% of clinical funding instead of 80%, which we get now. And sorry, Terry, back to your question, that if you have contacts in the Ministry in Finance or in the Health Ministry, let us know. And we will certainly do some direct advocacy with them, or if you do it directly on your own, that would be great. I wish, yeah, right. But you can certainly help. Anything that you can do to write letters to your MPP, to the Minister of Health, would be useful. Anything else? Oh dear, I won't ask who. Okay, so then I would move then to the appointment of auditors or the advocacy templates still available. Yes, Laura, they are. So thanks. That's a good question. The Communications and Advocacy Committee has been, as I said, active throughout the year in writing letters. So if people are interested in writing letters using that template, please let Lisa know. Oh, and they're on the website too, Lisa says. Under what, Lisa? Okay, great. Super. Under the advocacy section. Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, so I'll move then to the appointment of auditors. So a motion that it's resolved to appoint KPMG LLP as the auditors of the corporation for the 22-23 year. Could I have a mover?
Catherine, it's Barb Hogberg. I move.
Thank you. And a seconder?
It's It's just
Good.
Corentin, and I'll second.
Thank you. And then did I have a question in there?
No, you had another possible seconder.
Oh, okay. You have to be quick. So could I then have the poll?
Just downloading the results. $39 votes for, 1 proxy for, 0 against.
Thanks, Rhiannon. So I declare that KPMG are appointed as auditors for the financial year ending March 31st, 23. We now have a number of motions relating to the election of directors. And we have 2 new directors to be elected and 4 reappointed. And you have the bios of all the directors were circulated with the meeting material, with the AGM meeting material. So the first motion is as follows. Resolved to elect Michael Pentland for a 3-year term as Director of the Board of Directors, Hospice Care Ottawa. And Michael, if you could unmute and say a few words so that people will get a chance to see you kind of in person.
Hi there. Thank you. Can you see me now and hear
Yeah.
me? Great. Merci, Catherine. Bonsoir tout le monde. Mon nom est Mike Pentland. Je suis associé à Deloitte dans le bureau d'Ottawa. I'm a partner with Deloitte in the consulting practice in Ottawa with about 25 years of experience. And what's perhaps noteworthy is I was actually on the board of hospice at Maycourt some time ago. I was there as we joined with Friends of Hospice and from the inception of Hospice Care Ottawa. And it's really, to me, a special organization fulfilling a special role for giving guests dignity in end-of-life care, caring for their families, and with just an exceptional staff, exceptional volunteers, and really generous contributors as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Michael. Merci, Michael. So could I have a mover and seconder for the motion, which is to elect Michael Pentland for a 3-year term as Director of the Board of Directors of Hospice Care Ottawa?
Hi, Catherine. It's Bill Cuff.
Sorry, Bill, I think I had somebody just before you.
Okay.
Did I?
Yeah, it's Muriel Peterson. I would move that.
Thank you, Muriel. And a seconder?
Rob Cushman will second that.
Thanks, Rob. Any discussion? Oh. Okay, Rhiannon, if we can go to the poll, thank you.
38 votes for, 1 proxy for, and 9 against. 1 abstained.
Thank you. So I declare the motion carried and Michael has been elected to the board for a 3-year term. Congratulations, Michael. Welcome aboard. Félicitations. C'est vraiment un plaisir de vous avoir avec nous.
Thank you so much.
The second motion is as follows: to elect Lynn Toupin for a 3-year term as a director of the Board of Directors of Hospice Care Ottawa. Lynn, I'd ask you to do the same thing, to unmute yourself and say a few words so we can all see you. I know you're there, Lynn. Lynn, es-tu là?
I don't see Lynn.
Elle était là, j'ai vu son nom, mais bon, peut-être, maybe she had to leave. So,
Oh, she's back.
Lynn, es-tu là?
I am so sorry. I'm getting a new computer. My battery just died and I had to run downstairs and get my connection. My apologies. How to make a terrible first impression.
Yeah, that's okay. It happens. It's the downside, the big downside, one of the many of not meeting in person. So Lynn, if you'd like to put your video on, unmute and say a few words. If you can.
Bonsoir tout le monde. Good evening, everybody. My apologies again. I know what I'm doing tomorrow morning. I'm going to get a computer. It would have been wonderful to see everybody, but I guess it'll be next year. I thought we were being extra prudent, but I'm just coming off COVID, so my apologies if I'm still coughing. You've seen my bio, so I hope you've had a chance to read it. I've worked in the charitable sector for 30 years, and now that I have more time, I was looking for an opportunity, and I have been a huge admirer of the work of Hospice Care Ottawa for many, many years. I live in Orleans with my husband, our daughter, our 3-year-old grandson, and a dog. And I am really coming onto this board for really 3 things. One is, as Catherine has said, I think there needs to be, we can't stop the fight. We need to advocate strenuously, continually for an equitable funding formula. It makes no sense to me that this is such an important service. It's an indispensable service to the community. So the fight will continue. Because I live in Orleans, I am hoping to be able to be as helpful as I can to ensure that we get services in the East End. And last but not least, I look forward to collaborating with the board colleagues. I think I'm really looking forward to rolling up my sleeves, getting into the work, being part of committees, etc. And I'm honored to be invited onto this board because I think the staff are tremendous, and I think the work, it's not a service, it's a gift that we provide to the community. So again, my apologies and thank you.
Merci, Lynn. Thank you very much. I'm sorry to hear about COVID. I'm glad that you are recovering. Whoosh. Could I have then, so the resolution is to elect Lynn Toupin for a 3-year term as a director of the Board of Directors of Hospice Care Ottawa. Could I have a mover?
Yes, Terry Murray, I can move that.
Thanks, Terry. And a seconder?
Sylvie Lalonde, I second.
Thank you, Sylvie. Is there any discussion?
None in the chat.
Okay, could we have the poll, please?
So we have 39 votes for, 1 vote by proxy for, 0 against.
Thank you. Thanks, Rhiannon. I declare the motion carried and Lynn's been elected to the board for a 3-year term. Félicitations, Lynn. Congratulations. It's great. Great to have you on the team.
Merci.
The next set of motions are to re-elect 4 current board members for a second 3-year term as directors of the as a director of the board of directors of Hospice Care Ottawa. We'll do each of them in turn. And I'm not going to ask each of you to speak. You have the bio notes, members have received the bio notes. But I would ask you to perhaps unmute you after I do the motion. If you could unmute yourself and put your video on just so people can get a glimpse of you and perhaps say bonjour, hello. So the first is to re-elect Josiane Gomez as a director for a second term as director of the board of directors of Hospice Care Ottawa. Josiane, I'm not sure she's there.
I am here, Catherine.
Great. Could you put your video on, Josiane, so people can see you?
Yes, I'm trying to authorize. For whatever reason, I'm trying to. I'm having an issue with my camera.
Okay. But we know you're there and we have your voice.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Josiane. Could I then have a mover to re-elect Josiane as a board of directors?
It's Barb McNally. I so move.
Thank you. And a seconder?
I will do that. It's Susan Murray. I will second it.
Thank you. Any discussion? Rhiannon, nothing in the chat? Whoops. So can you put the poll on, Rhiannon?
Yeah, sorry, I think I've clicked on it, but my computer's not responding. One moment. Melissa, are you able to launch this poll? My computer is not responding whatsoever.
And it's making a funny noise.
Oh, there it goes.
Oh, there it goes. So you can see resolved to re-elect Josiane for a second 3-year term.
$39 votes for, 1 vote for by proxy, and none against.
Thank you. So I declare the motion carried and Josiane has been re-elected to the board for a second 3-year term. That's great, Josiane. Congratulations. The next motion is to re-elect Barb McNally for a second 3-year term as a director of the board of directors of Hospice Care Ottawa. Again, Barb, could you unmute and put your video on so participants?
Hi, everyone.
See
My
you.
pleasure to serve on the board. It's a wonderful organization.
Thank you. Could I have then a mover and a seconder for re-electing Barb McNally for a second 3-year term as a director of the board of directors? A mover, please.
Catherine, it's Barb Hogberg. I'd be happy to move.
Thank you.
I'll
And
be happy to second.
and who's that?
Judy Field.
Judy Field.
Mhm.
Thank you, Judy. Any discussion?
Nothing in the chat here.
Thanks. Could you put the poll up then, please?
One second. 39 votes for, 1 for by proxy, 0 against.
Thank you. So I declare the motion carried, and Barb, you've been reelected. Congratulations. Great to have you with us again. The next motion is as follows: resolve to reelect Wendy Nicklin for a second 3-year term as a director of the Board of Directors of Hospice Care Ottawa. Wendy, could you, as others have, unmute and get your video on so we can see you? She may not be on yet, actually. Wendy's on the board of
Queensway
Carleton, and she is at that board meeting. So
I
she
don't see her in the, oh, she just joined.
Oh, terrific. Wendy, your timing is terrific. We're just, there you are. Hello.
I'm here.
We're just about to make a motion to re-elect Wendy Nicklin as a second 3-year term as the director of the Board of Directors of Hospice Care Ottawa. There you have Wendy on the screen. Said hello. So could I have a mover, please, for that?
Terry Murray, I'll move that.
And that was who? Sorry, Terry Murray. Thank you. And a seconder?
Denise Alcock.
Denise, thank you. Any discussion?
None in the chat.
Thank you. So to the poll, thank you.
Seconds. $39 votes for, 1 proxy for, 0 against.
Thank you. So I declare the motion carried. And Wendy, you've been reelected to the board for a second 3-year term. Congratulations. And that's
Thank you.
great. Some très
Thank you very
heureuse.
much.
The next motion is to re-elect Johanna Sahas Martin for a second 3-year term as the director of the Board of Directors of Hospice Care Ottawa. Johanna, I can see you at the top of my screen. Could you put your video on and unmute and say hello?
Hi there. Bonsoir. Thanks very much, and I look forward to continuing, if I may.
Merci, Johanna. Thank you. Could I have a mover to re-elect Johanna Sahas Martin for a second 3-year term as the director of the Board of Hospice Care Ottawa?
Tony Gregg.
Tony Gregg, move, and a seconder.
Bruno Carquito, second that. Thank you.
Bruno, thank you. Seconder. Any discussion?
Nothing in the chat.
Great. So the poll, excellent. Thank you.
$39 votes for, 1 proxy for, 0 against.
Thank you, merci. So I declare the motion carried, and Johanna has been re-elected to the board for a second 3-year term. Congratulations, félicitations à vous quatre. Donc, Johanna, Josiane, Wendy, and Barb McNally. Great to have you continuing to be with us. Super. I also want to introduce our other new board member, who is Christine Beelan. Christine is the past president of the Maycourt Club of Ottawa, our sustaining benefactor and valued partner. As such, as past president, she becomes an ex officio member of the board. Welcome, Christine. Would you please unmute and say a few words? There you are. Hello.
Yeah, I unmuted as you were speaking. I'm really proud of the role that the May Court plays as being a sustaining benefactor, and I'm looking forward to the next 2 years of playing that role of liaison between our two great organizations. So thank you.
Thanks. Welcome. Although you've been at a couple of meetings, so it doesn't feel like you knew, but you are. So
I was great to meet everybody in person at the retreat. Since then, it's been all Zoom.
That's true.
Or Teams.
Teams, yeah. So next, I have the huge pleasure of introducing you to our incoming chair, Benoit Hubert. Benoit, can you unmute and say a couple of words?
Merci. Thank you so much, Catherine. It's a tremendous privilege and honor to become Hospice Care Ottawa's new chair. I'm quite humbled by the task. I have to say that I'm so privileged to be surrounded by such a crew of immense quality on the board, and also with the support of a tremendous team headed by Lisa. I'm sure that we're going to continue the amazing work that has been ongoing for years at hospice and achieve some of the strategic results that we want to see in the future. So it's an honor. Thank you so much for your confidence. Merci infiniment. Je vous remercie comme bénévole, comme membre de la Maison de soins palliatifs d'Ottawa. Je crois que notre rayonnement déborde des cadres d'Ottawa et on a comme mission de donner la dignité à celles et ceux qui terminent leur jour entre nos mains. Alors, comptez sur moi pour assurer la continuité de nos services dans ce plus grand respect pour tous les gens de la communauté d'Ottawa. Donc, thank you so much. It's a privilege. And thank you as well, Catherine, for the confidence you've had in me as vice chair over the past 2 years. Tremendous pleasure. Merci.
Thank you, Benoit. Merci. I'm just super, super pleased that you're coming in as our chair. And as our vice chair, would introduce Wendy Nicklin. Wendy, could you say a few words, please?
Yes, well, thank you very much. Like Benoit, I'm incredibly honored to have been approached, which was a surprise, to have been approached and then supported to assume the role as vice chair. I sincerely look forward to working with Benoit. I think we will work well together and be a strong team and continue to help the organization, the board itself, and the entire organization to continue to progress. And as Benoit mentioned, working with Lisa and her team is always an honor, and the competencies and capabilities within that team are tremendous, and it's really an honor to work with a board that is quite esteemed, and with Lisa and her team. So thank you, everyone, for your confidence in me, and I look forward to the next few years. So merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Benoit. And we're in great hands with you two as leading the stellar board of directors. So encore une fois, félicitations et ça serait super, je sais. I have now kind of a, not sad, but a little bit of a regretful task, which is to thank 2 outgoing board members. The first is Rob Cushman, whose second term is up. Board of directors can serve for 2 terms, and Rob has done that in superbly well. Certainly, Rob, your stellar professional expertise and wisdom, as well as your overall and continuing commitment to Hospice Care Ottawa, has just been of great benefit to the board and to the organization as a whole. Rob, could we have a little, could you unmute? And there you are. And maybe if you want to say a couple of, but you can only say a couple of words, Rob. I'm going to cut you off.
Well, first of all, thank you, Catherine. It's been a pleasure. I mean, I could name everybody, but I won't. It's a remarkable organization. Catherine, you've done a great job and you've left it in great hands. So thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Appreciate that. I also want to thank Dorothy Scorsone, who was our ex officio May Court Club board member. Dorothy was before Christine, the past president of the May Court Club. I don't know that Dorothy is here. Dorothy, are you here? I didn't see her on, and Lisa has said.
Don't believe so.
Yeah, okay. But I do want to say, just for the minutes, to thank Dorothy for her participation. She was always, your presence was always welcome. Your knowledge, the support that you bring from May Court and your community experience were welcome additions to the board. So we thank you for your time with us. So I think the next step is a couple of other motions for bylaw updates. And the first is to amend and section 401B2AB of bylaw number 1. And these motions were also included in the material that was sent out to you with the meeting material for the annual general meeting. These relate to participation in our board of directors. The first is that now section 401 reads that the persons occupying the following positions shall be ex officio directors of the corporation: the executive director of the corporation and the medical director of the corporation. We want to amend that bylaw to remove the executive director and the medical director as ex officio members and have them be considered guests at the meeting of the board of directors. And this may seem overly technical, but it came about for a couple of reasons. One, that as we went forward with accreditation a couple of years ago, it was noted in the accreditation that one of the issues that we needed to resolve was that it was not appropriate for the medical director and the executive director to be ex officio, that they should be guests. And in Ontario, the law prohibits charities from providing any remuneration to directors. Well, we don't. Both our medical director and our executive director are paid by the organization. So this was a way of resolving any confusion or any grayness that would be around there. The board has determined that the medical director and the executive director as guests will be permitted to attend and be heard at all meetings. So their presence, their participation will not change, but they will be recorded as guests rather than as ex officio members. So the motion is to be it resolved that section 4.01 bracket B bracket II bracket A, capital B of bylaw number 1 be removed, and that the executive director and the medical director be considered guests at meetings of the board of directors. Could I have a mover to that, please?
Is Jocelyn Contant? I will so move.
Thank you, Jocelyn. A seconder?
Barb Hogsberg.
Thank you, Barb. Any discussion?
No discussion in the chat.
Thanks. Can we move to the poll then, please?
$39 votes for, 1 by proxy for, 0 against.
Thank you. The motion is carried. Thank you all. The second bylaw amendment, which we are asking for approval, concerns section 4.06, which currently reads that at least 2 directors shall be recruited with experience in the health sector, and at least 1 director shall be recruited from among active volunteers in hospice services. and at least one director shall be elected or appointed from a slate of candidates provided by Briere Continuing Care. So we wish to make amendments to that to actually to remove those sections. The rationale being that we feel that it's important that the bylaws be less restrictive so that we are able to recruit board members who would based on the skills needed at the time rather than particular affiliations. So the motion is, be it resolved that section 4.06 bracket C and bracket D of bylaw number 1 be removed. Could I have a mover, please?
I'll move the motion, Madam Chair. Rob Cushman.
Thank you, Rob. And a seconder?
Terry Murray.
I'll
Terry
second.
Murray.
Okay.
Who was the second person? Sorry.
Sorry, Henny Nadell.
Okay, Henny. Since Terry, you've seconded a number, I'll ask Henny. Thank you, Henny.
Okay, fair enough.
Henny Nadell. Thank you, Henny. Any discussion?
No discussion in the chat.
Could I have a poll, please?
$39 votes for, 1 by proxy for, 0 against.
Thank you. So I declare the motion carried. Thank you all. So we now turn to a different phase of the meeting. So the motions and resolutions are basically done, and would turn to more about hospice and eventually what you're all waiting for, I know, for our guest speaker. Lisa, I'd ask you now to, I'll turn the meeting over to you for a presentation about hospice.
Sorry to be a little slow there. Hello, everyone. Just give me a moment. I want to put up some slides here. And I had a little trouble with them.
While we're waiting, I'll just say that the slideshow at the beginning was super. Thank you, everybody who put that together. Moved me to tears.
I don't know what happened there. Okay. Well, thank you. Can everyone see the slides now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, hello and welcome everyone. Bienvenue tout le monde. Merci à chacun et chacune d'entre vous d'être venu à ce soir à la réunion annuelle de la Maison de Soins Palliatifs. Thanks to all of you for joining us tonight for another virtual AGM. As Catherine has said, we had hoped to see each other in person, but we know COVID is still out there. We've heard about it a bit more tonight. So we've taken this cautious approach, and it really has worked for us so far. I'm so pleased to report that we have had very little COVID in our facilities over the last 2.5 years. And I think this cautious approach has helped to ensure that our staff and our volunteers and our clients remain as safe as possible. So I echo that I hopefully next year we'll be able to be in person again. I'd like to take the next few minutes to reflect a little bit on our last year. I know all of you have likely read our annual report to the community cover to cover, so I probably don't need to repeat these statistics, but I will. We did see and serve 927 clients, both in the residence and our community programs, despite COVID and despite having to pause programs. So we're really pleased that we were able to do that. We've had over 24,000 volunteer hours given, and we have raised $2.6 million thanks to everyone. So we have had quite a year. And despite COVID, we have had some great things happen this year. This client of day hospice wrote to us and said it was wonderful seeing all of you and meeting yesterday. Gosh, how you've been missed. And that was the sentiment of a lot of people, both clients and volunteers and staff, and that ability to see people again in our community programs, our day hospice, even our grief and bereavement programs, and starting our walks again. And we've had to keep a lot of things or had to be cautious about a number of things, but we've still been able to do it. And I think we've done a really wonderful job. Our volunteers and staff at the Reddy Shankman Hospice, not to be outdone, decided to have a high tea to welcome the day hospice clients back. So that's the photo you see, and they had even included little sandwiches and goodies. And it was such a wonderful celebration to have people back together again. We did have to do things a bit differently for our events again last year, but we were still very successful. You'll see in this photo on the top left that we have some of our volunteers who are preparing the goodies and things to sell at the pop-up shop for the homes for the holidays. And though we had to change the location for the pop-up shop, it certainly was very successful. We had yet another successful hike with lots of participants, lots of dogs again, and the Holes for Hospice Golf Tournament had another successful year as well. And in other great news, we found a new site for our Maison de l'Est. Thanks to the generous rent agreement from Le Promenade Retirement Home in Orleans, we have a new location to run our day hospice program. It's in Orleans, 10th line in the Queensway, so very easy to get to, 130 Rossignol Avenue. And our staff and volunteers have been busily trying to get the place ready, and we hope to be offering the day hospice program soon in October. This year, though, we also weathered some storms. And quite literally, as most of you know, we had the storm that hit us in May and damaged some of the beautiful trees we had at our Reddy Shankman site in Canada, and as well damaged the roof to part of our residence, in that 2 rooms have had to be closed since that storm. Fortunately, repairs are underway, as you can see by the photograph, and we hope to have that cleaned up and open pretty soon. But I have to do a huge shout out to the staff and to the volunteers and the neighbors who came to help out the night of that storm, and especially to Hine Construction, who were actually the people who built our new residence. And they came and stayed well past midnight to make sure that the roof was safe and secure. We've had some other kinds of storms too, and I just want to share a little bit about that with you. The impact of working with COVID, it has hit many, many people hard, and it's not really over. And especially hard hit have been the staff and volunteers who work directly with clients who are used to providing that end of life care in the residence, where they can be face-to-face and smile and provide that touch that they haven't been able to do. One of our registered nurses, Kimberly Volk, beautifully prepared a YouTube video on what it's really like providing care at end of life during COVID. There's a link to the video there, and I'm happy to share that with anybody who would like to see it. But she shares how she felt she didn't look like herself under all those layers of PPE. It was hard for people to see her or hear her or feel her compassion, and almost felt like she had nothing to give. And we are still dealing with that, the impacts of working in COVID, the impacts on staff morale and burnout. And it's a priority this year for us to continue to work with our staff to support them. A huge thanks to Kimberly for sharing this with us. It really helps us to better understand. And this idea of not being able to provide face-to-face comfort as we once had pre-COVID, and sort of this distance that it's created. I've heard people say that, you know, COVID has really changed hospice. It's really caused us to lose a bit of that magic in hospice. So it got us all thinking about what really is that magic in hospice? You know, is it the people, the staff, the nurses, the volunteers? Is it the beautiful gardens and beautiful locations that we have, the dogs that come to visit? Or is it that comforting hug, or the volunteers sitting vigil with a resident, or a day hospice guest maybe playing the piano for all to hear, the comfort kit hand delivered by volunteers to a grieving family member? One story that comes to mind is how we had a person who just wanted to go outside and put her bare feet in the grass one last time. Is the magic about staff and visitors and volunteers when they stand outside their office doors or line the hallways as a family makes their final walk out of the hospice with their loved one? Many of us think it's the ice cream that you can have for breakfast, lunch, or dinner, or anytime, or bacon anytime, as you know, in the residence, or that hair wash or that shave that just helps to preserve somebody's dignity. Well, I think it is all of those things. As one family told us, sometimes in life you get these little glimpses of the best humanity has to offer. They appear out of nowhere and they ask for nothing in return. I'd like to share some examples of how amazing care and compassion continued even during COVID, where staff and volunteers went that extra mile, as they always do, how they're able to accommodate people's wishes and special occasions. This photograph is of a wedding, which was supported by staff and volunteers at the Ruddy Shankman Hospice in the family room, and they made an unforgettable day for the couple. There's a story recently about a young man who came from Macedonia 4 years ago. He's a husband and a father, and he died at our Maycourt site. And the family asked if he could be dressed in a special suit and bow tie. So the staff watched the YouTube videos overnight so that they could get the suit and the tie, the bow tie particularly, just right and just the way he liked it. In this picture, we have a lovely resident who was an avid gardener, and she had some special seeds that she really wanted to plant. They were a gift to her from a physician who had cared for her. And our wonderful volunteers cleared out a patch of the garden and planted those seeds with her close by. And here we have our day hospice client Clive, whose artwork you may recognize. The Lupins 2022 were on the front cover of that community report this year. Since starting day hospice, Clive started painting, and he says attending day hospice has helped him lower his anxiety related to his cancer diagnosis and treatments. So I guess I wonder, what is it we can do to ensure that we keep that magic, those magic events that happen at hospice? I think sharing stories is one of the ways we can do it, and we would love to hear your stories and encourage you to share them with us. But we do have some priorities that we really have to look at over the next year, the coming year for sure. And the first one really is about taking care of our own, our staff and volunteers who have worked so hard and are feeling the effects of COVID. We're looking at many ways that we can support mental health, physical health, and provide resources and training as we can. But of course, we can't do any of this without the money, as Catherine has mentioned. So priority is to continue that advocacy for funding, to be funded appropriately for the services we provide so that we can appropriately pay the staff who do the wonderful work with our clients. We will be looking at growing our individual giving program for fund development, which includes legacy giving and monthly donors. And our priority really remains to serve our community with the high quality care and really reach those in our community. So How can we better reach our Francophone population? In particular, you've heard a bit about how we want to expand those services, and we'll be continuing to advocate, and also to reach some more diverse populations in our community will be part of those priorities for this year. I'd share with you this quote from a family member. You may have seen it. It was on our social media post at some point last year. We cannot express the gratitude we felt having had our loved one spend his last 2 days in your care. We could never have had the quiet, restful last hours with him that we did without your help. The kindness and empathy from all of you is beyond anything we would have expected. Staff and volunteers accommodated our endless inquiries and fears and gently guided us through a process we knew nothing about. They were there when we didn't expect but needed them at all times. What a pile of gems you have there, angels who walk among us. You made our future mindset and memories much more pleasant, and will cherish them as long as they allow us to carry on in peace. So I guess for me, that probably describes the magic as much as anything. And though while I do believe there is a little magic in hospice, I think what I would suggest to you is that what we accomplish at hospice is really the result of hardworking, caring, compassionate people who believe that everyone matters in life and in death. Thank you so much for helping us to do that.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, Lisa. That was terrific and so moving and so descriptive, and that magic is there. I know as a residence volunteer how those events happen and how every little how much caring and compassion there is there throughout hospice. So thank you for so eloquently sharing that with us.
You're welcome.
Anybody, I have a couple of minutes for questions, but then I really do want to get to our main, to our guest speaker. Great. Thank you again, Lisa. That really was wonderful. And the stories are so important. So now I want to turn to our guest speaker, Dr. Sandy Buchman, and I would ask Rob Cushman to introduce our guest speaker, please.
Thank you, Catherine. That was wonderful, Lisa. It's sort of hard to be composed after that, but it is a very good segue, actually, because tonight we've had a long list of exceptional guest speakers, but tonight we have one of us, someone who has spent their life delivering palliative care. We have Dr. Sandy Buchman, who is a palliative care physician. Sandy, as I noticed, welcome, Sandy. It's great to see you. It's very inspiring what I'm sort of moving from the paper to the voice here. But Sandy's worked for more than 15 years in the Mount Sinai system in Toronto, providing home-based palliative care and end-of-life care. And on top of that, actually, he also worked with the homeless community in Toronto, Inner City Health Associates. So commendable. Sandy is now the founder and the medical lead of a new residential hospice that's currently being built in the Toronto area. So Sandy, you can help us with that funding problem. That's great. We're all in this together. Sandy has a long list of titles and accomplishments. He's an associate professor in family and community medicine, the Division of Palliative Care, not only at U of T, but also at McMaster. And he's a chair in palliative care and a medical director for the advancement of palliative care at the North York General Hospital. He has served, you might know, Sandy just served recently, 2019, 2020, as the president of the Canadian Medical Association. And before that, he was the president of the College of Family Physicians, both at the national level and at the Ontario level. He's had a number of awards for his contribution to family medicine and his contribution to palliative care. So you don't want to hear me talk, you want to hear him talk. So Sandy, welcome. We look forward to hearing what you have to say.
Well, thank you very much, Rob, for the kind introduction. Bonsoir à tous. Merci de m'avoir invité. Just really thank you for this opportunity to speak to you all tonight. As I was watching Lisa's presentation and just hearing, I mean, it just touches my heart as the founder of a new hospice, which I'll remember. We have a lot to learn, and it just feels so right to hear your story and your experiences. And I'm going to sort of talk some about that tonight because we just don't have enough. So I think we can begin with the slides. It's just, I don't know, just great to be here. And I'm going to talk about two passions I have. My passion for palliative care. That's one, my passion for advocacy in healthcare, but in particular for palliative care. And I guess I've been thinking a lot about, are we doing enough? Have we gotten far enough? So let's talk about that. And I hope we have some time for a little bit of discussion or questions at the end. Next slide, please. This is my dad. Name's Murray. He was a wonderful man. Wonderful sense of curiosity, sense of humor. He loved the English language and studied it intently and knew all sorts of words. And as you can see, he passed away in 2022, earlier this year, during the Omicron crisis. And I'm going to tell a little bit more of his story as we go along, but as he lay dying, and which we had talked a lot about, he said to me, Sandy, he said, I don't want a eulogy at my funeral. I want a panegyric. And I looked at him and said, Dad, what's a panegyric? And he said, go look it up. So I go to the computer and I look up panegyric, and I learned that a panegyric is words of adulation and praise, and you can't say anything bad about anybody. And I told him what I had learned, and he said, yep, that's right. And he said, and by the way, he said, make sure my hearing aids are in at the funeral so I can hear everything people say about me. And that was my dad, and I could share the whole evening talking about some wonderful jokes. But I'm going to talk about his care, and I'm going to talk about my experience and my sister's experience, who also happens to be a physician. Not that that matters, but there's something about being in this field and not being seen as essential caregivers. And one of the, from a personal point of view, one of the reasons I think we do have to do better advocacy. And next slide, please. So I guess you may recognize this. These are old Mac computers. Did some of you have one? I certainly did. I had that little one on the middle shelf, little box with a little sort of TV screen. And that was from a long time ago. And I think that maybe some things in our palliative care system really haven't changed. So how did we get from here? Next slide, please. To here. This is one of those brand new Apple stores. And I think you've probably seen them in the local malls, if not during later part of this pandemic than before. And this is a completely revolutionary design. And how did we get from that kind of those old Macs and on the store shelf to this? Can we imagine the future of hospice palliative care, especially in terms of the challenges that we currently face? Challenges in equity, challenges in access, and challenges in having a more compassionate healthcare system? And what does an Apple store really have to do with that? Well, let's look at how this happened. It was kind of back in the fall of 1999 when Steve Jobs was thinking there has to be a new way to sell our Macs and our new colored Macs. And the long and short of it is he contacted a design company who had helped him design these color Macs. And he said, we need a new idea. And those coming into here was a game changer. But how did they start? Did Steve Jobs have a vision of what this Apple store looked like? Not really. When you learn the story, they started with a blank slate. And they developed a kind of creative course of iteration, experimentation, improv a process of moving from where they're very uncertain about what their future was to invention through an act of creativity. And that's kind of the analogy I'd like to use about talking about advocacy of palliative care. Next slide, please. So how did they make this Apple Store? Next slide. It kind of began with the examination of what Apple's core values were. Okay, and think about it in terms of our world. They then framed their questions and the problem that they had. It involved major collaboration outside their usual circles through external stakeholders. And in particular, it took research, experimentation, mistakes, failure, and learning from those mistakes and failures. And ultimately, it took a deliberate intention to understand the end experience of the user, in our world, the patient and their family. So let's kind of begin with this template. Next slide, please. So I think we have a big problem and challenge in hospice palliative care, and that despite years of progress in our field, and we have come a long way. I remember in the early 1980s when I started out in palliative care because I had a patient with AIDS. We didn't even know what AIDS was. We had no idea what HIV was. And I learned palliative care and AIDS all at once because we had no training in it. We have come far, but I really believe that we still are the kind of poor second cousins in our healthcare system. Access to palliative care is still a problem, as I mentioned, equitable access even more so. Many Canadians don't die in their preferred locations. You have a beautiful hospice. Do you have enough hospices in the Ottawa or the Champlain region? In Toronto here, we have one adult hospice, a wonderful hospice, Kensington Hospice. We do have a hospice for patients with AIDS, Casey House, but very few patients are dying of that anymore, thank goodness. We have a children's hospice, Emily House. Within the city of Toronto boundaries of over 2 million people, we have one adult hospice. So access is still a big problem, and how these hospices, for example, are funded is a major issue. So Canadians don't get to die in their preferred location. Not enough Canadians have access to advanced care planning, goals of care conversations. Palliative care is still offered too late in the illness trajectory. Folks often receive futile treatments that just increase their suffering because other options aren't often. Why hasn't our advocacy in palliative care been more successful? Next slide, please. We have done so much. We have these great plans that are out there. And what ends up happening to these wonderful plans, the framework on palliative care in Canada and the health service framework from the Ontario Palliative Care Network, the OMA has offered. We all have these great solutions. And what happens to these things? They kind of end sitting up on a shelf. We never seem to get the funding and the resources that we need to move things ahead. Why is it so slow? What is it about our society that doesn't see palliative care as a priority? We have fantastic arguments about the cost effectiveness, what Canadians want, more suffering the patients will experience because we just can't break that barrier to palliative care. So what can individuals do? What can our hospices do, our organizations like HPCO? What can we do to advocate for palliative care differently? Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. This means I'm kind of sad, and this kind of means I'm mad. So I'm really sad sometimes at the state of affairs, but I also get mad. And both of these passions allow me to kind of get into the mood and become more passionate about what we need. I think we are sad, but we do have to get a little mad. Next slide, please. So my dad was admitted to hospital during Omicron. He had a small hemorrhagic stroke. It was just before his 99th birthday. And he was functioning pretty well, fairly independently. Just need a little help with walking, a little help with dressing, but a sharp mind, completely independent otherwise in his activities of daily living. And I convinced him when I was called over late one stormy snowstorm night that he was likely having a stroke. He had started to have some difficulties with his speech. I insisted he go to hospital. He didn't want to go. But as he climbed on the stretcher, he said, make sure they know I'm a DNR. I said, of course, Dad. And when I got ready to come to the hospital, the paramedic said, no way. And you're not allowed in the hospital. It was during Omicron, and I know what that is. I work in a hospital. I wear PPE. I understand the issues, but my sister and I were not allowed to go anywhere near the hospital. We were limited to the occasional conversation with a staff member, and it took hours to get those conversations. We were able to speak to my dad once by telephone during his hospitalization over 3 or 4 days. Only once. And during that call, he screamed and cried at us to get out. Why? He was placed on a stretcher. He was not allowed to get up. He was put into pens. He wasn't allowed to do anything on his own, and he had every capability. Motor control was fine. Everything was fine. We weren't allowed to be an essential caregiver to feed him, to get him to the washroom, to advocate for him. And he said, I want out of here. And he was of sound mind, and we talked, and he said, we signed him out against medical advice. And when I hardly got him into the car to bring home, I recognized he was dying. We had no clue from the staff. He was a 2-person care at all times. So what did I do that evening? I called up my palliative care colleagues, and he had palliative care in the home the next morning. We hired 2 personal support workers round the clock. Who gets that privilege? I get it because I'm a palliative care physician known in the community. I have that knowledge. We had the financial resources to provide the dignified and adequate care. And we ended up having a good death at home for him. Family members came in from around the world and surrounded him. And it was really good. But what do people do who don't have the advantages and the resources and the knowledge I have? What do they do? Next slide, please. We have to make healthcare a team sport. We have to see patients and their families to be on the roster, essential caregivers. It's inexcusable when we don't do this, and we need to make a vast improvement in palliative care. Let's talk about the advocacy part of that a little bit. Next slide, please. This is a beautiful community of Rosedale in Toronto, just north of Bloor and Sherbourne, if you know, in central Toronto. Lovely homes, mansions, etc. But people get sick, and I was providing home-based care, home-based palliative care at the home of a lovely woman, a 75-year-old woman with advanced pancreatic cancer. And she had our team, our interprofessional team, nurses, doctors, PSWs, etc., who were visiting her in her home. But she also had resources. She had caregivers around the clock. She had a very supportive family. Next slide, please. I walked 3 kilometers down with the nurse I was working with to Dundas in Sherbourne. And again, if you know Toronto, the whole neighborhood changes. This is where when Rob mentioned where I work, this is where I worked with Intercity Health Associates with the Palliative Education Care of the Homeless program. We worked in Seton House. This is what I saw. We worked in church basements. And I went to see another woman in her mid-70s with the same disease, advanced pancreatic cancer. She was getting 4 hours of personal support per day from the system, from home and community support services. But that's it. She had no family. She had no loved ones. She had no one else to advocate for her. She didn't have the resources she needed through the day. And her functional status was really poor. She really wanted to stay in her little bachelor apartment that really wasn't suitable, but it was her choice, which we respected. We did our best. But who advocates for these people? Who advocates for these people in the lineups? They have behavioral issues, addiction issues, mental health issues. And these people are at huge risk of being abandoned by our healthcare system. And we are just not doing a good enough job. This is where compassion and a compassionate option to counter these inequities cares has to occur. Does our government care? Next slide, please. We also have our own problems within the palliative care. Okay, how is it possible that during the pandemic, the access to palliative care was longer for racialized individuals? It's beyond our comprehension. These are the kind of things that get me mad. Next slide, please. Why is access to palliative care so dependent on your postal code in this province? There are huge gaps and inequities. There are just so many regional disparities. Next slide, please. Do you remember these headlines during the pandemic, particularly in the first couple of waves? Okay, why has long-term care been so substandard? Why hasn't a palliative care approach been more integrated into long-term care? It was a shame and a tragedy what happened across Canada, and particularly in Ontario during the pandemic. These were the headlines. We weren't prepared at all for the pandemic. And one of the ways that we can do this is maybe implementing more palliative care, a palliative care approach. Do you know that the average lifespan for a person entering long-term care right now is 18 months? Shouldn't that be kind of a clue to initiate a palliative approach, a more comfort approach? Next slide, please. This is what really disturbs me. What happened during the pandemic in long-term care? How did the residents die? Were they alone? Perhaps they were comforted by a compassionate and caring nurse or personal support worker who were just run off their feet and scared to death themselves. Did they get any other form of palliative care? I honestly don't think so. Were comfort measures instituted for emotional, psychological, spiritual suffering? What was the grief and bereavement like for their loved ones afterwards? If we learn anything from the pandemic, this is it. Our advocacy for the most vulnerable is failing. Next slide, please. So this may be some good news. So here we are. We're building this hospice in Toronto, in North York, a population of over 1 million people that hasn't had any hospice right now. You know, best practice suggests there should be 10 to 12 beds, PCU and hospice per 100,000 population. You know, we probably need 120 in North York, where I'm a chair and medical director of the Freeman program at North York General. We have 0 beds right now. So myself and a couple of other concerned citizens, and that's what it's up to, thought we really need to build a hospice in our jurisdiction. Okay, we really need these beds. I actually vision a whole network of hospice residents across the region, really across the province. It is so cost effective. I think you probably know the values, but the last Auditor General's report in December 2014 said the cost, and then these are in 2014 dollars, and you can just scale up for today. The cost of a end-of-life care bed in hospital was $1,100 a day, and in hospice it was $450 a day. That's a $550 difference. And say, you know, 100,000 people die in Ontario a year, 70,000 die in acute care hospitals. If we took 35,000 of those 70 and transfer them to hospice, let's do the math. 35,000 times $550 times the average length of stay, 21. I will tell you that that number is more than $400 million. So like you, we need to do fundraising. And we got our group together, and in 6 years, we have raised $18 million. And we thought that was going to be enough. And now with inflation and the pandemic and construction costs, we're up to needing $28 million. Our government gives us $200,000 for capital construction per bed. That is $2 million out of 28 million. So we're looking at 7% support. Why do all these initiatives and projects have to be charitable? Why? There's no plan from the Ontario Palliative Care Network. There's no plan from the Ministry of Health to build more hospice beds or more community. And the savings, aside from the better quality care that could be provided in a hospice residence, the savings are astounding. So how come we haven't been able to advocate more for that? Next slide, please. What else gets me? I hope this isn't too much. Very early in my career as a family doctor, I was very much into birthing. Everything was birthing, and in particular, I was into home birthing. I worked with midwives and interprofessional care to establish something we tried to call the Toronto Freestanding Birthing Center, and we were established until the Harris government got rid of it in 1995. We have such a differing attitude around birthing and dying, but I really feel they're two sides of the same coin. With birthing, it's an inevitable process. It's going to happen. With dying, it's an inevitable process. It's going to happen. We as healthcare providers just really make it safe and comfortable. It's person, like mother and baby centered or family centered. Our care is person and family centered. And we just make it safe and comfortable, something that's going to happen. So why do our hospitals and other units have beautiful intrapartum units with big windows and wood trim, and so many resources go into birthing and so few go into dying? Why does one population get better? I'm not against the getting at birthing at all. I think they should have it. I'm just advocating for a more equitable look. Our society values birthing over dying. They are both social events, not really medical events. Why is this so? Next slide, please. You know, there's a saying that there are no atheists in foxholes. When we are under moral stress, humans start thinking about God. You know, what is beyond this life? So where did spiritual care, bereavement care go in our healthcare institutions during so much of the pandemic? Even as the pandemic recedes, how timely is bereavement care? I can't get it for my patients. They got to go on waiting lists for months and months. How come it's not considered essential care for our patients and families, and even ourselves, those of us involved in care, healthcare providers and volunteers? Next slide, please. So what happened to compassion in our society and in our current medical culture? Where did it disappear to? How did such a culture evolve that has led to so much unintended suffering? I really think it's a problem in our society that has become way more polarized. There's a rage that exists that, I've been around a while. That is, like, was it hidden before? It's certainly there. You guys experienced the convoy in Ottawa. What was going on? What's happened to our society? Next slide, please. I think there are many factors that block the compassion in healthcare and in our society. And I list some of them here: our work overload, moral distress, the financial pressures, sometimes toxic organizational cultures, and lack of adequate training in our society that palliative care could really inform us. Next slide, please. So I think many of us, because my colleagues and everybody I work with in palliative feel like we don't matter. Dame Cicely Saunders told us we matter just because who we are. That's how we approach our patients, just because we exist. And you and I practice that. But in our society, in our healthcare system, what we do seems kind of superfluous, not valued as much. It's great, thank you, if you can do it, but you kind of got to get by on your own. It's kind of a luxury when so much focus is on changing lives. And that was really a focus during the pandemic too, or in any humanitarian crisis. We focus on trying to save the lives, and there's less attention and care for those who are not going to make it, those who are not going to survive, and who are dying and suffering at the same time. I just think we've been struggling as the poor second cousins of healthcare for far too long. Next slide, please. So in Western culture, we seem to put our heads in the sand. We can choose to ignore the reality of death, dying, and human suffering. And so I think it manifests in the true lack of integration into healthcare and woefully inadequate underfunding of our healthcare services in this country directed to palliative care. And I can see a note, it's superfluous until you need it. Exactly. Okay. I think we as a discipline somehow, though, have failed to adequately advocate for palliative care. We haven't done badly. There have been more incredible success. I've worked at it all my life, but I think maybe we need a different approach. What's happening here shouldn't happen anymore. Next slide, please. So maybe I wonder if we've been talking to ourselves too long. All about the great care we can provide. I give this talk and similar things to different groups, but I'm preaching to the converted, I think, most of the time. There isn't that kind of interest. Have we been taking those great frameworks and plans and designs and just really sharing them with each other until they kind of fall out of date. Next slide, please. So this is a well-known quote from Albert Einstein, insanity's doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. So what can we do? What can we do differently to go further in our advocacy? Next slide, please. This may seem like a little change of course, but maybe you recognize this as Michelangelo's angel. Okay, and did Michelangelo, when he looked at this, did he have a perfect vision of what this angel will look like when he looked at the piece of stone? I imagine he had some preconceived idea, but I think and what we're learning is he went through a process. And as he carved away the stone, as he worked away at designing it, the angel eventually emerged. Did Steve Jobs have the same vision for the Apple Store? Evidence is beginning to show us that artists, novelists, designers, musicians, and most creative people don't think like I have a vision and this is how I'm going to get there. They learn as they go. They experiment, they create. They start with kind of a blank slate or a blank page like a novelist or a musician, and they begin to experiment with this. Now, I'm not saying that in palliative care, we should become our inner artists, far from it. I think actually we need the foundation of our education, our experience, our skills, our talent. These all figure prominently. But I'm wondering if we need more of an artistic or creative mentality in trying to get to where we need to be in palliative care. Like a great Buddhist tradition, I think we need to cultivate a space of uncertainty and knowing how to use our human creativity to go with that uncertainty. Next slide, please. And who's this? Well, this looks like a sleek cyclist. Actually, it's a cyclist from the Tour de France. And so I'm going to give an example of what I think we can do in palliative care. Next slide. And this is the Tesla. So what's the connection between that cyclist and the Tesla? Well, back in the summer of 2008, when the main designer for Tesla is a fellow named von Holtzen, he was a cyclist. And he was tasked with designing this new electric vehicle, modern, efficient, effective. How are they going to sell? How are they going to do this? And then he was watching the Tour de France, and as a cyclist, he looked at that sleek cyclist, and he thought about the energy he was providing and how the body in this bicycle was designed. And ultimately, he tested that and tried to translate this into his vision of what the car is. And he went through this iterative process, the creative process, until he got to this form. And his whole creativity was engaging with others and with different ideas, nothing in the ordinary. Next slide, please. So what we're talking about is actually making to know a creative course of iteration, experimentation, improv, a process of moving from uncertainty to invention through this very active creativity. And as you can see, it's maybe a bit of a shameless plug. The author has the same last name as me. Well, that's my brother, Lorne. And my brother, Lorne, a Canadian who transferred to California and is CEO of the Art Center of Pasadena. And that program is a design school. And that's where they go through this creativity. And he's been very interested in this whole human creativity process. And the book goes into, this is how you begin. This is, I think, the framework that we could use. Again, our core values, I did this before, framing the question. We collaborate with all our stakeholders. We experiment and we learn and we make mistakes and we fail. And then we learn from that. Apologize for that. And we design to understand and address the experience of the user, that is the patients and our families. Do we dare to be creative in this innovative way? Next slide, please. So here's a bit of a proposed framework. Let's define the problems that we have that we need to address. We can iterate new possibilities as we create, accept failure when it occurs, understand the research is part of making that. It's not a linear process. Don't see the constraints that are on us, but as maybe opportunities. Use those parameters as to create possibilities, and then engage in conversation with everyone else who needs to be part of our system. Next slide, please. And here's a bit of a, I guess I want to plant a seed. I think palliative care is the discipline that can demonstrate compassionate leadership, that we can instill compassion into healthcare. We use every day. We can create cultures and organizations that have compassion at its core. And leaders can do this. It's, you know, if an organization is tense, if there's inequities, if you don't have a person's back, if you're afraid of failing, you don't take risks, you don't innovate. We need a supportive culture where we have each other's backs, where we can bring a compassionate approach to everyone who works there. And there's a whole method of doing that through compassionate leadership. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide. Yeah. So in compassionate leadership, it's a collective leadership. And who knows that better than in palliative care, where leadership is shared and non-hierarchical. It's not, you know, chief of medicine and then nursing and then social worker, then PSW, nothing like that at all. We are team members with family members, might I add, in a non-hierarchical, no dominating leadership. We do have each other's backs. We share it. We're interdependent across different sections and disciplines. So it's an approach to leadership that is authentic, that is open, that is curious, that is kind to each other, that demonstrates appreciation, and above all, compassion. Next slide, please. I think we're one behind. Yeah, sorry. That's what I was just referring to. Okay, it's a shared non-hierarchical leadership. Okay. And I think it's actually familiar to those of us practicing in palliative care. So this is really the essence of compassionate communities. And of course, you know Alan Kelleher's work as public health promoting palliative care and compassionate communities. And to be honest, I think you do it better in Ottawa, Compassionate Ottawa, than almost anywhere else. I've spoken quite at length with folks like Nick Busing and Jim Ninninger. You have it down, where everyone takes responsibility for ensuring there is high quality, continually improving compassionate care. Again, that shared leadership, that interdependent leadership with workers working together across boundaries in different sectors, and a consistent and authentic approach. Next slide, please. So I think we were one behind. So that's this. Yeah. Okay, we're good now. All right, we're on. No. Can we go back? We've been trained. So really, I'm just going to finish up there. To create different cultures, you can do that through compassionate leadership. And if you actually begin to demonstrate it, you get inclusion of everyone, you get enthusiastic teams, you have support, and you can get this inspiring vision and strategy. It all leads to this innovative and creative thinking that I was referring to. Next slide, please. So how can we get our own Apple Store? How do we get this model? Let's start with the state of uncertainty that we're in, but it's a state of possibility. And then we go to discovery and creation. And we can get something entirely new. We can go from a bicycle to a Tesla. We can go from an old Mac to this Apple Store. How do we begin that? How do we improve our access? How do we bring compassion into the symptom to maybe start it off? Now, does this seem like completely crazy and absurd to you? Are you saying to yourself like, uh-oh, what is this? Well, I'm trying to be kind of radical and I'm trying to be really out there because I actually think that's the medicine that it's going to take to actually get advocacy to be where it is, where our society starts to value what palliative care is. We have to make it attractive and we have to take the experience of all of us and our patients and families in time. You know, remember the old song by John Lennon, Imagine, you know, you say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us. I think that's where we have to work with some of these ideas. So we have to develop this process of iteration, of experimentation, improv, a process of moving from uncertainty to invention, to possibility through being creative, through using an artistic or design approach. Next slide, please. I leave you with Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Now, Ruth, an amazing individual, and she said, you know, it's your turn now, get up and fight. Next slide. and I'm seeing get up and create with compassion. Thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. I'm happy to take questions, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you. Thank you.
Wow. That's great, Sandy. Thank you. I know that we're over a bit, but absolutely understandable and welcome that we are, because we got to hear you. So I'll take a couple of questions before we move on. Is the easiest way to do that to put them in the chat? Rhiannon, how does that work?
Yes, the easiest way would be through the chat. And we do have one question already from Terry Murray. To what extent is MAID competing against palliative care, and is it winning?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear that well.
Sorry, the question is from Terry Murray, and it is, to what extent is MAID competing against palliative care, and is it winning?
Okay, there's a loud noise.
I can tell you, Sandy, what it says is, to what extent is MAID competing with palliative care, and is it winning?
Oh, I see. Okay, MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think MAID is competing with palliative care at all. When we look at the numbers of people, most are choosing palliative care. I think the thing is, though, that sometimes palliative care has limitations. So MAID is a legal option in this country. But I don't think it's competitive. I think they're really two different things, even though that they are both end-of-life options. My approach to patients who come to me and say, Dr. Buchman, I want MAID, I actually hear people say, Dr. Buchman, my life is intolerable, help me. You know, before MAID came on the scene, they used to tell us, I want to die. Now they say, I want MAID, because that's because it exists. So if I hear my suffering is, my life is intolerable, help me, I take that as a cue to explore patient suffering. And I think this is a competency that needs to be there for every single healthcare provider, that we begin to explore their suffering in all the domains that Dame Cicely Saunders developed. The physical symptoms, of course, pain and other symptoms, the emotional and psychological suffering, and the spiritual and existential suffering. And I will tell you that more often than not, you can find out why that person is asking for MAID, or the wish to hasten their death. And more often or not, they will do it. But there are limitations. Their suffering may not be addressed, or it's just their autonomy that needs to be respected. And but it's not a either or competitive. I think we have an opportunity there when someone says that, or when the MAID exists, to really develop the competency to explore their suffering. Too often, a patient says, I want MAID, and they're just referred on to an assessor and provider.
Thanks, Dr. Buchman. Here's another question. What can volunteers and staff do to advocate for palliative care and compassionate communities outside our systems, starting today?
Well, I think this is where maybe as a group or organizations, Hospice Palliative Care Ontario, for example, Canadian Hospice Palliative Care Association, the Canadian Society of Palliative Care Physicians, all the organizations that are affiliated with palliative care need to come together and begin a creative process. Start with a blank slate. How can we be creative? How can we really think outside the box and really innovate? We have so many great ideas that are out there, but why haven't we got the culture change? Can we really develop more compassionate communities in our city? Can we use Compassionate Ottawa's example? I'm actually trying to develop it in North York. It ain't easy. So I think we have to put our collective minds together and integrate and speak to others in the healthcare system and begin to see this as a really important priority, what Canadians want, and begin to make palliative care very attractive. Its cost effectiveness is beyond doubt, but somehow that hasn't got there yet. So I don't have all the ideas. I'm just trying to stimulate a new process that we can all get together and try to achieve.
Thank you. And I'll do one last from Dr. Paul Hacker. I think the process Dr. Buchman outlined for change applied to the entire healthcare system. We don't have a coherent set of goals for our system because we've never had, as a society, had that conversation. how do we get our politicians to start having that conversation, or better, how do we get politicians out of the healthcare planning business?
Yeah, fortunately, they control the purse strings, and they think in short term. They think in 4-year terms. If our government could, I could easily demonstrate saving $400 million by just building a network of residential hospices across our province. But which government's going to put up $400 million when they can just take a group like ours and only give us a couple of million or 7% of our total capital costs? So we need to be creative and think of different ways that we can do this. I do think some politicians get it when they've had the experience of palliative care. And it may be through compassion and compassionate communities that really begin to educate the public more that we can start this process. Okay, and maybe funding the compassionate communities approach and really getting it out there so we can educate the public. Because once they have a taste of palliative care and they know it, they never forget it, and they become strong proponents of it. Maybe that's a place to start.
Wow, that's very powerful, because we certainly see that here at Hospice, and the people who donate tend to be clearly the people who've been through. So I think I'll close off questions, and I'll ask Christine Beelan if you could thank Dr. Buchman, please.
Well, I don't even know where to start, but on behalf of the board of directors of Hospice Care Ottawa and everyone present this meeting, I want to express our appreciation for all that you do, both for this talk this evening, but all that you do for people across province. You've brought your years of dedication and service to healthcare to everyone, but especially to those facing the end of their lives. And I also want to express our sincere sympathy for the loss of your father. He sounds like a wonderful man with a great sense of humor. I think your talk has made us even more aware of the important role of advocacy for palliative care, and what role that plays in the cycle of care for people with terminal illness. So the role of advocacy in addressing the huge gaps in our system, your passion for compassionate leadership absolutely resonated with me, and our need to get back. We need you to get back to feeling like you matter. I like your little image with you matter. I think we all do. And I think the last thing is we do need to be more creative with our compassion and our goals for palliative care. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your kind words. It's much appreciated, and really the opportunity to speak to you all. We're all in the same boat, I think, right? And it's working together, supporting each other, having each other's back with compassion, but getting our creative minds going about what we can do that ultimately may be finding a way through compassion, which is what palliative care providers, volunteers, everyone involved knows best. So
Thank
thanks
you.
again.
Great words. And you can see from the chat, I hope, Dr. Buchman, the great enthusiasm that there was, an appreciation for your speech. Thanks, Christine, for your thank you. Before turning to the last item, if there are any last items, and before closing the meeting, I do want to recognize a particular volunteer, Tony Gregg, who has been a recipient of the Hospice Palliative Care Ontario 2022 June Calwood Circle of Outstanding Volunteers Award. He was our nominee, Hospice Care Ottawa's nominee to receive that award. Tony's in his 14th year of volunteering at Hospice Care Ottawa and has participated in both the residence and day hospice programs. Tony, are you still there? Good, you are.
Yes.
Turn your camera on so we can see you. And
yes,
a thumbs up and congratulations for the work that you do and all that you've contributed to hospice.
Much appreciated. I was surprised and pleased. It was a wonderful award, and the benefits that being involved with hospice care over 14 years is undescribable for me. It's made my retirement fulfilling, and the worth of being in hospice care and Maycourt especially is much appreciated. Thank you.
And to you, Tony, and that you've given your retirement to us is fabulous. So thank you. Is there any, and I realize that we are over, my apologies. But again, I think that listening to that inspiring talk and hearing from others was worth it.
I'd like to jump in, Catherine, if I can.
Sure, unless people have other business they want to raise.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, we can't let Catherine finish this meeting without sending her a huge thank you. I know we've done lots of thank yous to everybody tonight, but I just want to make sure everybody realizes what Catherine has done over the last 2 years. It's been a tough 2 years. I think all but one meeting she had to run online. And it's been it's been tough, but her support and her dedication to the big things and the little things has really allowed us not only to survive, but really flourish. I personally really appreciate her support and encouragement, as have, I'm sure, all of the employees and volunteers. So we do, Catherine, have a special Circle of Caring gift for you. You've probably seen those in the past, so I'll have to get that to you. But just really want to thank you. And you know, we'll miss you so much, but we also know that we've got you trapped as a volunteer in residence. So we'll see lots of you, I hope. I know Benoit was going to jump in as well. Thank you, Catherine.
Yes, thanks, Lisa. I too, as well, can't say enough of how much you've been a steadfast pillar for us, Catherine, over the past 2 years as chair, 2 previous years as vice chair, and of course, a longtime volunteer of hospice. You've been one of those candles, a constant pillar, constant presence, and constant wisdom for hospice. So thank you so much for your heartfelt dedication, time, and energy. You will always be remembered with us and through hospice, Catherine. Merci infiniment de tout cœur.
Thank you, Benoit. Merci, Benoit, and merci to Lisa. Thank you to Lisa as well. It's been a huge honor and a privilege to be your chair, and it's been great. Hospice is such a great organization, and I have a huge commitment to it. So thank you all for your support through these 2 years. So I would ask now for a motion to adjourn the meeting, please. Well, somebody, you're never gonna get to
Okay,
go.
I'll move the motion. Terry Murray.
Sorry?
Terry Murray.
Terry again, Terry Murray, thank you.
Yeah,
And a
Wendy
second.
Nicklin. Wendy Nicklin, I'll second.
Thank you. And I assume that we're all in favor. Anybody contrary minded? Then I would declare the meeting adjourned. Have a great evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks.